This video is a second in my basic pruning series, which is going to address how you can know when it is safe to go back and prune your plant a second time. I will be showing you today 3 different plants in our research and demonstration gardens here in North Central Texas. One is a small tree, the other 2 are large perennials. Hi, I'm Kara, and this is Home and Garden DIY, where I'll do the research and get you the information you need so you can get started on the projects that you want to work on. In addition to showing you those plants, I'm going to talk to you about why the plant needed to be cut back in the first place and what my purpose was. That is something that you'll need to think about in connection with pruning your plants, because you want to have a purpose. There needs to be a reason to cut that plant back. If it's doing beautifully and it's not too large for its spot and it's blooming, it probably doesn't need to be pruned. So my hope is that this video will help you to start seeing the situations in your own yard where your plants do really need to be pruned back for some reason. The small tree in this video that I mentioned is called a Carolina cherry laurel, or sometimes it's known as a Carolina laurel cherry. But either way, it's a cherry laurel, and it's a wonderful small tree that grows to somewhere between 20 and 30 feet in height. It is evergreen, so you get a beautiful glossy deep green in your landscape all year round, and it handles pruning extremely well. Another benefit you get is that the seed pods that it puts on are dearly loved by robins in the winter, so you're providing a good native food source for some of your wonderful birds in your landscape. I mention in the video that is with regard to what the new growth looks like on this cherry laurel that I'm getting ready to show you, that one of the reasons we are cutting this plant back is to open it up and get light both to the inside of the tree as well as to plants around it. A second reason, however, is because this tree is planted between our house and our neighbor's house immediately next to us. If you intend to plant a large shrub that is anywhere between 10 and 20 feet in height, and a shrub that large is likely going to be somewhere between 5 and even 10 or 12 feet in diameter. If you're going to plant a shrub that large, or you're going to plant a tree between houses, this is something that you need to consider very seriously, because those plants are almost 90% of the time going to need to be pruned, and they may need to be pruned routinely so that they don't get out of control. So I want to mention that to you as one of the reasons that we are pruning this particular tree on our property. So let's go ahead and get started with the Carolina cherry laurel. The cherry laurel that is dominant in this photograph shows the side from our property, which has not been pruned as yet. You can see how thick and dense the foliage is, as opposed to when you look toward the blue house next to us, how open the upper right-hand side of the tree is now, and I'll show you in just a moment why that is. Here is the other side of the tree where I have gone in and cut out an entire trunk. This was a 3-trunk tree, and I've cut out one entirely, and you can see now where the center of all of the foliage has been opened up, and you can see these bare trunks in the center of the picture down near, it's a Texas sage down at the bottom of the picture, but you can see those branches now exposed. This shot is taken just slightly closer than the prior one. And again, you can see clearly the branches and the trunks of the tree in this shot. Now, once the new foliage starts growing, this will be covered up, but I will have succeeded in thinning out this tree for several reasons, which I'll go into in just a moment. The first reason to thin out a tree like this, as you can see in this picture very clearly, the two trunks that will remain at least for now, the reason would be to open up the area around the tree so that plants near that particular tree get more light. You'll see to the right that there is a very small understory tree that needs some more light, and to the left there's a Texas sage shrub that needs more light as well. This is the other side of that same tree, and you can see because of the blue of the house next to us how very much this opened the tree up so that light can shine through it. From a slightly different angle, here is this same side, and again showing clearly the trunks that remain and now how much light is going to be able to shine through this tree into our side yard. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that it is important to get light to adjacent plants as trees get larger. This shot is of the small tree that I mentioned that was planted there purposely because the larger tree will give this smaller one some shade, which it needs and enjoys. Here's a close-up of that tree, but you can see there's a lot of bare branches here where there should be foliage, and that is because it is not getting enough light. So we're going to get that tree some more light. Here too is the Texas sage that I showed a little bit earlier. It also needs more light. You can see down in the bottom right hand corner there are some gaps in the foliage in the shrub, and that's somewhat because it has not been receiving enough light. So I will prune this shrub back to encourage growth on the inside of it, and we will see a much happier looking shrub the next time we revisit this area of our research and demonstration garden. Finally, here is video of the tree that I've just been discussing, showing you this bright, tiny green new growth that is coming out on the tree. And when you see tiny growth like this, whether it's a tree or another type of plant, that is when you know for certain that that plant can be cut back another time, and that you are totally safe doing that because the plant has not gone into shock as evidenced by this new growth, and thus you're completely safe to go back and do pruning another time on that plant. Moving on now to our second plant, which is a Texas sage shrub. These initial several seconds of video footage show you just an overview of how defoliated the plant is, and you can see all of the bare branches that are showing. The photographs that follow show the new foliage and how tiny it is. This is important to keep in mind in connection with pruning because you can actually speed up your process of forcing a plant to refoliate if you do cut the foliage back when it's very, very small. So these photographs show you just how tiny it is. Now in this second photograph, if you'll notice, right near the tip of my middle finger, you can see a tiny little leaf sticking straight up toward the top of the photograph. That leaf is probably only about 1/8 of an inch tall. It's just so small. You really could cut this plant back as soon as you saw a leaf like that. You wouldn't have to wait until you see a leaf the size of the one that is sticking upward at the top of the picture in the center near the first joint of my index finger. That leaf is probably most of 1/2 inch long, And it's a decent sized leaf. It's not full sized, but you wouldn't have to wait for a leaf that big. You could cut back when you see this tiny one that's near the tip of my middle finger. In this third photo, my main point of taking this was to show you the difference between the rather blurry full-sized foliage that is mature as opposed to this tiny new growth that is shown near my fingertip in the picture further in the background. So that hopefully will give you some perspective on, again, just how tiny this foliage can be when it's first coming onto your plant. And here too is more footage that shows not only the small growth as compared with the full-size growth, but how defoliated the center of this shrub is at this time and how much recovery it has to go through to be fully covered in foliage again. So at this point in the video, I am hoping that the details that I've provided you on the Carolina cherry laurel and for the Texas sage shrub has been helpful to you in knowing when you're safe to go back and prune your plant again, as well as what you're watching for to decide whether your plant needs to be pruned in the first place. Also, feel free to let me know in the comments if you have questions about the small trees or the large perennials that you have on your property so that I can answer your questions. Now at the end of this video, I'm going to have a bonus tip for you to help you when you're working on doing pruning of your plants, whatever size they are, around your property. So be sure and stick around for that. Our next plant is the Caldwell Pink Shrub Rose, and these next few photos demonstrate for you the beautiful green foliage on this plant, and it gives you some idea in these first three pictures how the pink of the roses shows up against that green. Now these pictures, you can see that the shrub really is quite defoliated and there's a lot of space in the middle of the shrub. That will be fixed as we continue to prune. The next three photos show this shrub from earlier in the year before we let it go so that we could demonstrate how to bring it back. And the foliage really is this green and the blooms really are this pink. This plant is glorious when it's in full bloom. So I thought that you would just enjoy seeing that. This needs to be pruned back. I'm going to pan up here to the top of the rose bush and you can see it is against a chain link fence here that is about 5.5 feet in height. When my husband cut this rose bush down, it was a good 2.5 to 3 feet above this fence. And I'm going to back away just a little bit here and show you what that looks like in relation to the fence. So, see, it was considerably defoliated. And after his pruning, let me back away just a little bit so you can see that. Nice bud here. Nice bright green foliage. Here are several other nice buds coming on. So you can see that right there. New flowers. So what we're going to do with this one, I'm going to cut it back again hard to force out more growth. Here's another place that even though we need deadheading done, there are new buds coming up on here. See this? See, it's right there with a bloom that needs to be removed. So we'll just take that off while we're here. But see, there's lots of nice new buds coming up on it. And then clear up here at the top, you can see we've got some nice buds coming on up at the top. And here's some good new growth. See that nice red growth there right in the center of the camera? So that is what you want to be watching for to prune again And so what I'm actually going to do when I prune, like I showed you, see we're here at the top of the fence looking at this new growth, I'm actually going to cut that new growth off, which is going to force the shrub to put new growth into these places where it has been defoliated and get this shrub back where it is covered in this beautiful bright green foliage and in these gorgeous pink blooms. I mentioned earlier that I would have a bonus tip for you, and I have mentioned this in my other videos and I will continue to mention it. The biggest thing you can do to help yourself when you're learning how to prune, or even if you're an intermediate or an advanced gardener but you haven't done this yet, I would encourage you to keep notes about what you're doing as you're pruning plants back in your landscape. When you note those things down about your pruning, what you pruned, why you pruned, what you cut off, what the plant looked like before you started pruning, you will benefit and your landscape will benefit and you will learn. So I would encourage you to just get a loose leaf notebook or a spiral bound notebook and just take some notes. What I always do is once I have finished my work in the yard and I get cleaned up and I'm inside, I stop then so that I don't forget the things that I want to note down. So I hope that's helpful to you, and I'll see you again soon.